You can let me know when you're ready.
Perfect. Your recording has started now.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. I think my topic is a little bit different than the topics we've been just hearing this morning, because when I saw this opportunity to just little talk about where we've been at and the impact of COVID on teaching, I thought this is what I'll do in my presentation. So it's about disruptive change or just a blip, and a question about whether what we've experienced and what students have experienced over the last period is, as you said, like something where we return to our old normal, or there's a new normal, or a completely different version of teaching and learning coming down the track. And in reflecting on that, that's what my presentation is a little bit about. So it is largely a personal reflection on this. I'm going to give people an opportunity to participate in a Jamboard at the end or towards the end of this. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and your ideas based on your own experience as well. I am from LAT, and I'm conscious of my colleagues who have done the earlier presentations, particularly the practice one beforehand, which I really, really liked, because we have social care students out a lot on practice, and that interdisciplinarity was particularly of interest, and also the previous one on assessment. But conscious that the points, the points of the average Leaving Cert student is 300 points, I was just conscious of a completely different teaching and learning environment when you're teaching into that kind of an environment versus, as people have referenced earlier on, 600 points. Anyway, here are my thoughts for today, and I'd love your ideas afterwards. Okay, so for us in higher education, we've been in the middle of kind of incremental change, or change in all its shapes and sizes over the last period of time. Like, we're conscious of, competition, online courses as competition, technology changes, massification, staffing issues around uncertainty and tenure, learners, the numbers, the points, their expectations about what higher education should provide, and funding issues, which are ongoing in a third level context. So we're familiar with the concept or the idea of incremental change. But COVID itself was a disruptive change and continues to be a disruptive change. So my reflection in this piece is kind of looking at, well, what did we learn? And I've concentrated on two kind of points. One was March 2020, that 12th of March, when we all got sent home, and how we responded to it. And then later on, I'll talk a little bit about the September experience, because that was different. And then finally looking at the reflections from my own point of view with it. So in March 2020, we went from teaching online, finishing out our semester, to trying to manage out the situation. So what we experienced, I suppose, was chaos but organized. We were finding ourselves in the middle of adaptation, responding flexibly to situations, trying to figure out, are we doing exams, are we not doing exams, the same as everybody here, I expect. And then we found, actually, what we noticed very quickly is a shift back to core principles. Like, what are the key things? What are the learning outcomes in the modules that the students need to achieve? How do we need to evidence that? There was the possibility of immediate decisions, which was really welcome. The idea that, like, instead of having to process through millions of loops, you could make a decision and it would be done. And in some ways, then the impossible became possible in that. So I suppose overall, that period was when we were thinking about the students, just getting them out the door. So less chaos, more evolution. So we tried to stay close to the tried and trusted, what we already knew, how we already knew things. We found that we were in a phase of adaptation rather than innovation. I would say we stayed close to what we had previously done, didn't try to do anything different. The focus, I don't know about you, the focus for us is about getting the students out the door. One of our big challenges was in relation to placements. So that reiterates or emphasizes what had been spoken about earlier. And the goal at that stage was completion, primarily. Then we moved into the responses. Like, so what did you do? And this is what my responses were. So we were looking at the technology solutions, and all of a sudden, whether we were the people who were digital natives or digital skeptics, like, you realize that the technology was the answer or is the solution. There were decisions to be made about, the online learning platform. Like, we use Moodle, other people have, I think, referred to Blackboard and so on. I'm moving to trying to increase the capacity of these to respond to assessments, feedback that was mentioned earlier, and so on. communication tools. How are we going to communicate? You know, we take so much of our interface with our students because they're in front of us to tell them things, but now all of a sudden you have to be conscious about how you communicated with the students, and how we communicated across that. We had an interesting conversation ourselves between using Teams and Zoom. I know other people are using different platforms. We found, which I'll come back to a little bit later on, is that Zoom was less demanding in terms of people working from situations where there is poor interconnectivity. And the students in the feedback that we're going to look at in a while spoke about that. Their use of WhatsApp and other kind of apps to stay in contact with one another. Then the notion of participation, like how do we get the students to engage with us? I mean, again, one of the pieces that we've been very conscious of is that it's been black screens and, you know, avatars don't provide feedback to you as a teacher, which is an issue. So how do we use participation? Like, so we've used Jamboard, Menti. People here will have used lots of different tools to try and get students engaged during the learning process. And then the questions of recordings, like using Panopto, embedded in Teams, Powtoon, etc., etc. So from not having the language necessarily of the technology other than kind of as support, then the technology started to move up front. And for me personally, in terms of my thinking about it as a teacher, what I found is that, like, I was constantly being adapting, trying to respond, trying to be creative, trying to find situations, trying to find new solutions to existing problems, learning by doing, training and development in that area. And like LIT had been really good, and our colleague Sarah, who's going to be speaking later on, like provided really good education in that field. But we were experimenting and being called upon to experiment and to try out different things. One of the things I really want to mention in terms of sustaining this for myself is my own team. And I know, I think I saw Billy and Nuala there, who are from LIT, but within the campus in Thurles where we're based, my colleagues have been hugely supportive. Like, we've had a WhatsApp group since the beginning to help us stay on track. We had what we called a caring coffee on Fridays to check in and see how we were doing. And we had built quite a lot of social capital together, which other teams will have had as well. But that has been really important in, like, problem solving, allowing us to adapt, allowing us to change, and so on. So that's been part of the March 2020 technical and the personal response. But in September 2020, like, that became a different kind of adaptation or a different kind of challenge. At least this is how I felt it. And again, you may have a different perspective on it. It was the idea of, initially, as we thought, sustaining it through 12 weeks and then semester 2. So now we're saying, okay, all the ways we thought in previous times, we're now going to teach students who we don't see, and particularly first years in that kind of context, and trying to determine, well, how is it that we can actually teach and do that? So question is about synchronous or asynchronous delivery. So I personally made a decision, and our colleagues did, to do synchronous delivery with recordings. The idea that we would stick to timetables, that students would be there and we would be there at a particular time and place. We made that particular decision in order to maintain our relationship with the students. Again, other people made different decisions. We found it very successful in that we've been able to have some sense of monitoring or engagement with the students, their possibility of connecting with us. One of the big things that they've given us some feedback on is the idea that it provided structure in their day. It provided order in the middle of all of the chaos. Then I've mentioned the Zoom or Teams dilemma already, because we spoke about that earlier. And then what a big message for us is that emergency online teaching is not the same as online teaching, because we're missing some of the design features, you know, that thinking process that would go on in order to declare or order to design a completely online program. So yes, ideally we should have that, but there's no time, and we've all had to adapt the best way we can. So what are my reflections on this in terms of what I'll take from it? We did a little bit of a survey with my colleagues with the students in what they thought about this, and I'm just going to put some of these up here. I'm not presenting it as the answer or the a scientific study, but in this little graph, this blue and orange are whether the students thought online learning was a good experience for them. And you see
Bridget,
almost half.
sorry,
Yes.
10 minutes is gone.
Yes, I'm keeping track too. Yes. And that almost half was here thought that it was a good way. They enjoyed the experience of it. But the red ones, this one over here says they didn't really enjoy it. It hasn't been a good learning experience for them. So that brings us with a challenge to this. Okay, what is it that we're going to take and how are we going to adapt? So I think what we're seeing is that the students, it's like a seesaw. What's good for them is not traveling, them managing work and caring responsibilities, being able to focus during class. And they had some quotations like this: breakout rooms were helpful, Zoom was better than Teams. What wasn't good, however, was not building relationships, no incidental learning, no peer teaching, not seeing or hearing students, missing the energy of college, no technology and the internet. And then from a participation point of view, they found, yeah, some people look bored. It was not great in terms of participation. We had great energy in the first semester, not in the second semester. So what do they think we should do for next time? What should we do? Should we be online or face-to-face? And this is the challenge. So they're suggesting that we should be face-to-face, but only half of them. Other people, 6 thought we should not be face-to-face, but some said we should. They neither disagreed or agreed. So what that's saying to me is it's complex. And for some people, and particularly the introverts, well, I don't think necessarily point to the introverts, but some people are challenged in an environment where there are large numbers of people and they like the quietness of it. So some people would like, this is more, this green group was the ones that said they would like it to be half and half. So just moving on to this, I have a Jamboard, and this is my pivoting this morning. This is my link for Jamboard, which I thought I could put in chat. But if people are willing to have a go at adding to that, we might come back to it later. People know Bitly, so the link is bitly.ws and the code is DOF3, DO capital F3, if you want to contribute to the chat on this. So it's Bitly with DOF3, but just by way of conclusion then, and I'll have a look at the Jamboard in a minute. What am I taking with this is, for me personally, the teaching, I want to continue recording because the students have really been appreciative of those, but I would, even if we are online, I would do it synchronously. I would try and make more use of tools for participation. One of the bonuses of being online has been the ability to guest speaker from any place in the world at any time to come and input into the programs. We wouldn't have been able to do that before. For my personal learning, like at some level, I've enjoyed the experience over the last while because it's challenged me again. Assessment is a problem. I think we've over-assessed over the last while, and this has come up as an issue. For the students, and I'm just going to conclude on this slide, for students, I think what my learning is, higher education for students is largely that it's a social space. And for them, the whole idea of participating in creating products, tools, events is the rewarding piece for them. They love the flexibility that the online has offered. For organizations, what do we see? Like we've used the language of flipped teaching, but is it a flipped university we're looking at in the long run? Like, is it one where lectures are online and the only spaces you need are tutorial rooms because they are the face-to-face vital parts of it, but the lecture could be delivered from anywhere at any time. It doesn't have to be in a large room with 200 students in it. Are we moving into flexible or virtual spaces? I'd love your thoughts and ideas. I really appreciate exactly the time that that you've given to listening to this and hopefully participating a little bit. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Bridget. Thank you for your reflections very much. Okay, we'll stop the recording. Thank you, Rose.